Welcome to Going In Blind. I'm your host, Zach Tidwell, and my guest today is an Air Force veteran, author, and caregiver to his wife, who suffered a major stroke as a result of her Moyamoya Disease in 2017. Together today, they're spreading the word about Moyamoya Disease and also helping others walk through hard times with grace. Please welcome Rezewski. And to everyone at home, thank you for listening. Please take a second to help me grow the show so that I can keep delivering these conversations week after week for years to come. Subscribe, rate, and review the show in whatever podcasting app you're using right now, and check out the show notes to follow me on social media and YouTube as well. When you share your favorite episodes, tag me and use the hashtag GoingInBlind. You can also join my mailing list at zachtidwell.net. And if you know someone you think I should talk to, have them send me an email at contact.goinginblind@gmail.com. All right, Brett, we're rolling. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Zach.
Yeah, I've been trying to figure out, I don't even know. I normally try and ease into these conversations a little bit, but this is, for people at home, you're a veteran, and then after your time in the Air Force, you moved on into, it was X-ray technology type of stuff for hospitals, right? And then,
correct.
Can you tell everybody what happened in 2017, and then we can dive into this wild disease and then everything that has come since, and see where we go.
Yeah, first I just want to say that, God's providence from the beginning. So I was an X-ray tech. So I been in the healthcare field. I was for about 10 years, and I'm so thankful for that because in 2017, my wife ended up having a massive stroke at the age of 35 while she was 6 weeks pregnant. And the stroke was from a disease called Moyamoya Disease. It's not many people have heard of it. It is rare. What it's characterized by is headaches. She had headaches her whole life. It was something that she was born with, and the doctors had never caught it, basically. So she had gone to the doctors several times. Even while we were in the military, she went to the Air Force doctors, and the Air Force doctors, they ordered a CT scan of her eyes, but I'm wondering if they had opened up the scope a little bit, if they would have caught, because what Moyamoya disease is, it's essentially a narrowing of the blood vessels at the base of the brain, and over time the brain realizes it's not getting enough blood and oxygen supplies, so it grows superficial arteries. And she was actually 6 weeks pregnant when she had the stroke at the age of 35, and we think that because of the increased blood supply while being pregnant, that it was just enough to kind of push those arteries over the edge, and they ruptured. And the rupture caused massive hemorrhage on the right side of her brain. The doctors had to, I was actually at work when it happened, and our kids at home they were 9, 5, and 2. And my son called 911, which saved her life.
And he's 9 years old.
He was 9 at the time. And what's amazing is a year before that, I started the show by talking about God's providence. So a year before my wife's stroke, Michelle had taught Connor how to dial 911. And he used those skills and to do what needed to be done to save Michelle. So, and I've learned a lot about what happened that night, especially kind of just piece things together. And it started, I was at work. I was taking x-rays on a patient, and I got a phone call. I let the phone call go because I was with a patient. I wasn't trying to be rude, but then I got a call again, and then I got a call again. And then, when you get a call over and over, you realize something else.
Obvious. Yeah.
Something may be going on at home.
Yeah.
And so I answered it after I got done with my patient, and Connor was like, "Dad, you need to leave work immediately. Mom is not okay." And I had no idea what that meant. And so at the house was actually a friend of ours. A friend of ours, her name was Shannon. And Shannon had been in the area. She doesn't live around us at all, but she was, I would say, probably maybe a mile away, several turns in order to get to our house. But she was where she needed to be in order to see the fire truck drive by, and she just had a hunch. She had a hunch that she needed to follow. And when she
Intuition is so
followed,
weird.
yeah, and when she followed turn after turn after turn, she was like, don't turn there, don't turn there, because she knew every turn closer meant closer to our house. And sure enough, she pulled up right to my house, and she knew something was going on. And so by the time she got here, the paramedics were already in the house. Michelle had been intubated on her bed, and our other boys at the time are 9, 5, and 2. And I was trying to kind of piece together the scene, what was actually happening while I was away, and I learned just recently that Connor at the age of 9, he had during the crazy one of the craziest times of his life, he had found peace. He found peace that, he remembered praying that God would give him the words to say to the 911 dispatcher, that he looked on the side of the house for the house number. He knew what street we lived on, so he put the two together and he had told the dispatcher where we lived. He remembered to lock up our cat because they knew that if the paramedics came and the cat was out, Gizmo could get out. So it was so calm. So when Michelle had her stroke, she had a hemorrhagic stroke, a TIA, which is a mini stroke, and a
Transient
seizure.
ischemic attack.
Exactly. And she had a seizure, kind of boom, boom, boom. And when Connor had walked into the room after hearing kind of a faint call from my wife, which was not my wife's real voice, because the stroke actually changed her voice. She used to have a pretty high pitch, but now it's a lot lower because of how bad the bleed was.
Just
And
immediately like that.
yeah, it's just immediate. And
Whoa.
Connor heard kind of a faint whisper. So he went in there, and while he went in there, he saw Michelle trying to call 911, but she wasn't able to. So after, I don't know, maybe like a year or two, talking with my wife about what happened. She remembers that her phone would probably doing like a night like a emergency, like a software update, right? When you have a software update, you usually can't even dial 911. Like your
Yeah,
phone
it's
is
out
just like
of
toast.
commission. Yeah.
And so that was happening while my wife was trying to dial 911. But when Connor had come in, it was apparently over because he took the phone, dialed 911, and the rest is history. The doctors had said if Michelle were 10 to 15 minutes later had she got there that much later, she probably would have died.
And I want to pause right here because I've got a million questions already and I don't
Hmm.
want to forget them. And we will come back to this as well because I believe this year actually a new medication has either come out or there's been advances in a medication that has basically extended the reaction time that or the window that we have to try and treat post stroke. But this seems like an easy enough thing for me to remember to come back to and jump back. But stepping back to you kind of laying the ground of what Moyamoya
Hmm.
is it a couple things for is it genetic or is it just a
Yes.
freak? Oh, okay.
No, it is genetic. So Michelle's grandma was 100% Japanese, and she died at the age of 50 from what we thought was a brain aneurysm.
Young.
And after they never did a biopsy back then because they just assumed that it was a brain aneurysm, so they let it go. But when my wife was having headaches, she would go to the doctors, doctor after doctor after doctor, talking about the headaches, talking about her grandma dying so young of a brain aneurysm. And Moyamoya disease is actually more predominant in Asian women. So since Michelle's grandma was 100% Japanese, that makes Michelle a quarter Japanese. And if some of the doctors were to dive a little deeper, they could have caught it. So Moyamoya disease is caught by an MRA. So, it's an MRI with contrast essentially.
Okay.
And had it been caught, there is a corrective surgery that they could have done that would have prevented the stroke from happening in the first place.
So, like with that scan on her eyes, if there had been contrast and they had looked, they would have seen that the vasculature is greatly shrunken at the base of her brain.
I would have thought that even if
Yeah.
they would have opened up the scope a little bit more in the CT, maybe there would have been an indicator to do a little more studies. But the thing that we really struggle with is that 2 months prior to the stroke, so this was in April of 2017, Michelle went into the doctor at very good history was given to the doctor about the symptoms that Michelle was having. So much so that in the summary of the visit, the doctor had written that Michelle has frequent, well localized mid right pain, stops her in her tracks, and it reoccurs. And at that appointment, Michelle was given an antidepressant saying she's a stressed out mom with 3 kids. And
Just dismissing it.
just dismissing it. And then, like a month after that, she was also having fainting spells. And for the fainting spells, she was given a Holter monitor because the doctors had thought that something was wrong with her heart. Nothing came back wrong with her heart, but they never put it together because the Moyamoya disease, that could have been a symptom of it because of the lack of blood and oxygen supply from the narrowing of the arteries. That probably could have caused the fainting spells.
Gosh, man.
And so, like, all of these things were put together. If they had been put together to a little bit more digging, maybe we wouldn't be in this situation.
Yeah. But that's, that's a tough spot to be
Yeah.
in also, because you can't dwell on that, because that's
Right.
it's not
Exactly.
productive, and it's not going to help you or her.
Yeah.
And in the brief interactions that we've had, I haven't, via email and even just talking to you now, I don't get the impression that you're in that place where you're like, well, these
No.
fucking doctors fucking missed it. Like, you could be in a different spot. And I think that says a lot about your character, because it's easy to fall into that, especially in something like that where you yourself are helpless to it, but it didn't have to be a totally helpless thing. But
Yeah,
with
one thing that we do is just try to bring awareness. Like we try to bring awareness on the disease and also about advocacy, because like a lot of people, when they get um you know a prognosis or whatever from a doctor, a lot of times they stop. They don't push, and with us, after so many times of going to the doctors, we finally felt like, okay, maybe this is something that she just has to live with. But the stroke was actually on the mid right side of her brain, exact point where the doctor had said in her
that
notes.
localized pain.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And with, I guess, the other question you touched on, that to essentially counter for the restricted blood flow, then the brain starts to create superficial arteries throughout. I get with that, does that, I get, yes, that is a function of how the body reacts to the disease, but does that play a role into how all of this eventually played out, or is that just a kind of a byproduct?
That's just kind of what happens. So
Okay.
Moyamoya disease it's a progressive disease and there's no cure for it. So a lot of people, like, the Moyamoya affected both sides of her brain. So eventually she had to have a surgery to correct the left side. But we're continuing have to monitor that with like annual MRAs, whatever the doctors want to order, just to see how like vasculature. Because if you look on a scan, if you look up Moyamoya disease in like Google Images or whatever, you pull up like an image of an MRI, it looks like a puff of smoke. That's actually what Moyamoya stands for, is puff of smoke in Japanese. So it's basically like it's really cloudy. because the vasculature is not it's not able to be dispersed
It's
throughout the
so
brain.
small that it
Yeah.
just comes up indistinct like that.
Hmm.
That is wild, man. For you being an imagery person, I guess
Mm.
that's got to be, I don't, I was about to say almost, if it wasn't your wife, it would probably be fascinating.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of those when you're looking at scans, and they're like, "Oh, wow, that's cool." But yeah, when it happens to you, it, it's a new perspective. So,
Yeah. And so the other thing you mentioned it twice so far,
uh-huh.
God's providence.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly? I know your faith is big to you, and I'm sure we'll get into that along this
Mm-hmm.
timeline. But when you're saying that, are you saying are you referencing his hand in things, or what do you mean by that?
Always, it's
Okay.
interweaved throughout.
Okay.
So I was stationed at Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, Washington, and now we live in Beaverton, Oregon. Beaverton, Oregon, there's some really good hospitals here. So I believe that if we had stayed where we were in Spokane, that I don't think that there were any hospitals in the area that could have supported Michelle for how bad her stroke was. So the fact, and where we were living at now, there's an expert who specializes in Moyamoya disease. And
It's weird
so
how things work out like
I
that.
I
Yeah.
know, and with the doctor saying that 10 to 15 minutes later that she would have died. But and happened to be in this place where there's an expert with Moyamoya disease. It's insane. It's insane how it works.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that God put us in the right place.
Do you ever, I mean, some of that, and I'm not, please be aware, this is not me dismissing that. I'm just, for the sake of conversation asking this. Do you ever, because I've done a lot of podcasts either, I'm 30, I think this is 37 coming into here. So I haven't done a ton of these, but I've done a lot. I've spoken to a lot of people over the past several years with my own story, and whether it be the suicide side of things or addiction. And, it's like looking back and piecing things together, you see it is,
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to connect the dots with hindsight being 2020. It's also, I feel like doing that is almost kind of comforting in the way
Mm-hmm.
of feeling like there is a larger hand at play here. But
Oh, for sure.
I've also on the addiction side of things, or I feel like you even see this with criminals who have committed horrendous crimes, where it's like they are so desperate for some sort of help from or salvation from whatever situation they've gotten themselves in, whether it's something, not that addiction is harmless, but that can be a victimless thing, and it could just be you and your own pit of despair as opposed to having directly impacted other people. But like people are so desperate that then they seek it out, and almost, I'm always curious with that. For you, have you always had strong faith?
My faith has grown. It seems like that when things happen in my life, God uses it to pull me closer to Him. So a lot of people tend to go the other way. But so, for
Mm.
example, back in 2009, we lost a baby. Michelle was 20 weeks pregnant with Jacob. And when his heart stopped, Michelle had to deliver him in the hospital like
Oh my
normal.
gosh.
So she had to have an epidural. And I remember holding Jacob in our hand, for the rest of the day, we just couldn't let go. And speaking about God's providence, so Jacob, when we were holding him in our hand, we seen that one of his legs was a lot longer than the other. He had a soft tissue band around his right arm, all the way around the circumference. And my enlistment was ending in the Air Force, and we were living on base housing. So during that time, I had to find a new job. I had to transition into civilian life. We had to find a new place to live,
There's a lot of turmoil,
all
and you
while
just lost a
mourning,
child.
our miscarriage. And but it's like that's when God, like, really kind of, I don't know if woke me up is the right term, but he drew me closer to him, you know? And I mean, there's a reason why like jail time ministry is so powerful because that's when like the inmates, they don't have anywhere else to go. They're at the bottom and God meets them there. And that's what he did. That's what he did with me.
I guess with the jail time side of it, I have a much more cynical look at it, which is, take that for what it is. I realize that that might be wrong, but it's like, okay, you have these people who have done horrendous things, and some of them have made mistakes, and that's very different from being a horrible person, right? Some of them are just horrible people, and it's like when you see that guy is like, oh, I'm safe now because I accepted Christ as my savior, and now I'm absolved of all the wrongdoing that I've done and the rape and the torture, the murders that I've imposed on other people. Yeah, that's where my skeptical side of it comes in. But were you raised to be like, or, I was raised somewhat religious growing up, and then I developed my own ideas as an adult, specifically, by the time when I got out and was in the Marines, I like kind of started to find my own way. Was that for you? Were you raised that way, or did you find that all on your own?
I was raised in the church. But we jumped around from church to church. I never had like a home church like we have now. We've been in our church now since 2013, and I'll get into later about how much that's been an impact on us. But I never knew what it really meant to have a relationship with Jesus until I was in the military. I was actually stationed. So after tech school, or after basic training in San Antonio, I went to tech school in Biloxi, Mississippi. And there I went to a church, Grace Independent Baptist Church, where I met this Marine. And this Marine, he was a big guy. Like his haircut was high and tight, your typical Marine
Jarhead.
cut.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like he walked me down what's called the Romans Road. Like in the Romans Road, there's certain verses in the Bible, in the book of Romans, that you can use to lead somebody to salvation. Like the wages of sin is death, but um, salvation is the free gift. So the verses like I like so repetitious, like in a way that I never heard it before. So I think and the week after that is when I got baptized. And so I think that was like one of the key moments in my walk of faith. But then I would like to say that everything has been good. Like I've been solid and, going all in for Christ after that, but that wasn't the case. And my faith has been probably up and down until the last few years, especially since Michelle's stroke. So over the last 8 years, I feel like God has not only drawn me closer to him, but I feel like he's given me more of a purpose now. Like I'm on the show with you, and I wouldn't be on the show with you if it weren't for what happens with Michelle. I wouldn't be, having a YouTube channel helping Christian husbands and fathers become better leaders in their family. I wouldn't be doing these things if it weren't for that.
Yeah.
And like one question that someone asked me like, does that mean that you are happy this happened? I'm like, no, not really. I definitely would not wish this on my wife or anybody else. But at the same time, it's caused growth in us. Like my kids are doing amazing. I feel like they have a sense of compassion for other people that they may not have had before.
I was totally going to say that. I think, first of all, again, I've already said it once, but like you find contentment in your circumstances and you choose to make the most of them instead of dwelling on, the downsides of it. And there's, again, just what that says about your character individually. I'm sure Michelle's also a very strong woman, and it sounds like your kids are too. But, in the same vein as your children, having, yes, they've have been through a lot here, but also the empathy that will have installed in them. My my middle sister Kennedy has Down syndrome, and she was born when I was 11. And I'm telling you, man, I mean, it changed our whole family having the exposure to someone with a disability. And just, there was a lot of, and it's not like I understood all the turmoil that was going on with all the health issues that she was having and everything that my parents were having to do just to keep her trucking early on and things like that. But that really, I've had that, and I know that changed me. And also so I'm 29, Kennedy is 18, and our youngest sister is only 7. And so I've been blind for 6 years. So she doesn't remember me when I could see. So she has an older brother who's completely blind. And then she has an older sister who has Down syndrome. And like the depth of personality and just the amount of caring that is in that little body as a result of having just, that's just a normal part of her life it's incredible. And I'm sure
Yeah.
sounds like, because you said your youngest was 2 when this happened,
2.
correct?
Right. And he doesn't remember mom before the stroke.
Which, I mean, that just, again, you wouldn't want that to happen to anyone else, but like that is going to shape these into your kids into incredible little young adults. And just because they have so much more empathy than your average individual. And but to bring, since I've derailed this for like 20 minutes asking my questions, I'm sorry,
That's
this
all
is
good.
just how my brain works. But coming back to the doctor said, if it had been another 10 or 15 minutes, Michelle wouldn't be here anymore. This is you've lucked out with the area that you're in, with the hospital and the specialist. But so what about it, that extra, and I think we had gotten there. It was, yes, you talking through the timeline of the story, but also speaking to God's providence. I believe that was the second time when you mentioned it. So, everything's gone right with, I think it was Shannon that followed the fire
Yes.
trucks and just had that inkling. And again, intuition is so weird. Like there's obvious, we know that we don't know anything about the brain still. But if you think about humans, like we are an organism that is all over the earth. And so I feel like there's something to that. Like she was connected to you guys somehow. But so bringing it through back to that time, I mean, and if I'm skipping over anything here, please, direct me back on path. But the road to recovery, she was 6 weeks pregnant. She's just had stroke, seizure. Now you're finding out that she has Moyamoya. What comes next?
Well, that night, the word that always comes to my mind is what the doctor said over and over, the word of grim. Like her survival was grim.
It's not a great thing for a doctor to be telling a husband.
No, but they got to be real, right?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
And they wanted to prepare me for the worst. So, and it was like, I'm not sure if other people experience the same thing that I experienced, but I want to go back again. I'll come back to Michelle and the timeline. But with me at the hospital, there were about 25 people from my church, including my pastor, and he was with me in every conversation with Michelle, with the doctors talking about Michelle. And if there was a question that needed to be asked, he was asking the question. And it was so good. When the doctors were telling me that, it was grim, that her outlook was grim, it was like the next 24 to 48 hours would be critical based on that would tell us a lot more. So, but then the next day, um, I saw her, and actually, after the surgery, I saw her, and she had a helmet on her head because the doctors actually had to remove the right half of her skull.
To let pressure out.
Yeah, well, on the way into the OR, they had to drill a burr hole into her brain to extract 75 milliliters of blood in order so that it didn't explode. Because it's like when you have a balloon, putting a lot of pressure on a balloon, it's eventually it'll pop, right?
Except that popping would have been, that
Her
constriction would
brain.
have been her brain. Yeah.
And so they had to relieve some pressure. And then while they were in the OR, they had to drill down the middle of her skull and over the right side. So they took the bone flap off, put it in a bone bag, and they had to store it in the freezer when they were going to be able to reattach it later on. And then had to resect the majority of the temporal lobe of the right side of her brain and part of the frontal lobe. And while in surgery, they also had to extract 125 milliliters of blood. So total about 200 milliliters of blood. And the bleed was so bad that it pushed the so it pinched off the brainstem. And there was about a 1 inch shift of the midline of her brain. So that's how much the right side had pushed the left side over. And again, the outcome was grim. We didn't know what to expect. But the next
She
day, she
conscious?
started, no, not at
Okay.
all. She wasn't
I
conscious at
figured
all.
probably not, but I was like, dude, I'd like just the thought of knowing that all of that was done to you and being alert. Ugh. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Um, no, what is really amazing is she remembers, because we were actually wrote a book. Our book is called Hope Undeferred, Finding the Light While in the Tunnel. If you go to hopeundeferred.com, that's where you can find the book. It's on Amazon. And while I was writing the book, it took 4 years to write the book. And I was interviewing her shortly before we published it. And I had learned more that day than I had known for years prior. And Michelle said that when the paramedics were taking Michelle out of the house, she was unconscious, but she still remembers thinking about the kids. She's like, are the kids going to be okay? And it's like a mother's heart, but she remembers thinking about that. I'm like, no way. That is just crazy.
That's bizarre. Yeah.
And so when I saw her, when I first met her at the hospital, I just whispered her in the ear before the surgery. I know I'm going back and forth, but I
You're
told
fine.
her, I said, Michelle, you got to fight for us. And I didn't know really what that meant. So and then fast forward again back to the surgery. So yeah, they resected a big portion of her brain, and the fact that she survived that and still wasn't brain dead is amazing.
Yeah.
So and then eventually, like a day or after the surgery, she was responding to verbal commands: lift 2 fingers, raise your thumb, and she started to do that. And still the doctors were like, well, just, don't just hold on because she still might be a vegetable her whole
Yeah.
life. You know, okay. So they're trying to prepare me. I get it.
What
And
was
then
that like having that prospect for you? I mean, were you even in a spot where you could even process that, or was it all just there was
I
so much
was,
going
I
on?
was, I was scared,
Yeah.
I can't lie. I was scared trying to figure out how am I going to raise 3 kids on my own? How am I going to do it? I have to work full time. And but it's been amazing how God has really given me peace through it all. Even while Michelle was going in for surgery, wow, God gave me peace during that time, peace that I can't even understand. So while there has been fear, there's also been like, okay, I know everything's gonna be okay. Everything is gonna work out, and it always has. In ways, there's a verse in the Bible that say God will provide even more than you can even ask or imagine. And so after Michelle, she started regaining consciousness. She started opening her eyes. We actually got her on her feet. So she remains paralyzed on her left side. She's not able to walk on her own. But with the help of like 3 or 4 other people, we were able to get Michelle out of bed and onto her feet like a day
Get her
or two after the
cruising.
surgery.
Wow.
And because one thing we were told is really important for people that have had any kind of brain trauma, getting getting them on their feet is so important for the body to have that the weight bearing is it's so important. So we were able to do that, just literally holding her up. So again, continues to defy expectations.
On for her, man, there's some grit in there for her to be
Hmm.
like, 'cause she also could have been like, no, fuck this. I just had a stroke. Like, get away from me.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
could have. She could have. But and then the swallow ability, so she wasn't able to eat for about 6 months after the stroke because the place where the signal to swallow originates from the brainstem, and because the stroke had pinched off the brainstem, she wasn't able to swallow. She had a feeding tube. But on November 2nd of that year, so right before Thanksgiving, so she was in the hospital from the time of her stroke until November 2nd of that year. So she was hospitals, skilled nursing homes, rehab, all of these different facilities. And during the course of the time, she's been working on PT, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and we were trying to get her swallow back. Well, shortly before she was discharged, she had a swallow study done. Now, me having an X-ray background, I'm not sure if you've heard of modified barium swallows. Do you know what those are?
Yeah. So I was going to school for nursing before I shot myself and working as a CNA. So I've been in the room for that stuff before.
Gotcha. So
Yeah.
when they have to, well, for everyone who doesn't know, it's when you have to eat like different types of food and drink with that white chalky barium.
Just gross.
Yeah. So that shows up on an X-ray. And so me having that background, I was like, I know what to look for when people are aspirating or when it's actually going the correct way and down the esophagus instead of down in front where the trachea is. And then the very first swallow, it went back to her esophagus. And I was like, yes. I was like, I knew from that point that she was cleared. And then from there, she progressed from ice chips, and then she had to do like a pureed diet. I think her first real meal was like a pureed cheeseburger. Totally gross.
Dude, I had the same thing after I shot
Yeah.
myself. I'll never, I got pureed peaches was my first real food
Yeah.
after.
She had
It's
that
glorious.
too.
That is so funny.
But and then she gained more strength, and I was there in the room when they plucked that feeding tube right out of her stomach. So that was an amazing thing. So God's providence.
On again, man, I'll probably pound on this 12 more times, I'm sure, because we're just getting into the meat of this, but the character of both of you guys, like people don't realize. I mean, you see inspiring videos of like a dude relearning how to walk after he's been in a car accident or something like that. But what you don't see is when you're, like you touched on all of the rehab that she had to do, when you're that person that is having to do all of that while you're in the hospital, it is basically a full-time job from the time that the hospital opens up to the time that all of the not on call and not night staff people are going home from work. It is every hour someone new is coming into your room and dragging you
Hmm.
to PT or speech or testing your cognition or taking you to another scan or doing something else invasive. And so like again, just the will for her to go on, and the support there is huge too. But it's just I want to make sure people appreciate all of what was going on there.
Hmm. Yeah, she still does therapy. Every other week she goes to an outpatient rehab center, and they stretch her out. She does some standing. She has a hemi walker, which is like just a one-sided walker. Since one side is paralyzed, she has to use her right hand, and she's able to stand that way. So
Okay,
she still is working.
getting after it.
Hmm.
Awesome. So that's that. Gosh, you said that was November that year when she finally came home, and obviously it's not like I'm sure even getting to now where it's what do you say once a week or once every other week.
Once every other week now for
Yeah,
therapy.
I'm
Yeah.
sure that was probably a gradient there,
It
but
was. She was doing home health therapy where they were coming into the home and doing therapy here.
okay.
So, and then I took on the role of caregiver. So,
And you might be already aware of this if your state already has it, but here in Colorado, I know because like I know this it would be a potential for my parents with my sister Kennedy. If you have a loved one who needs total care like that, if, and not all states do this, but in Colorado specifically, I know they do it. If you go get your CNA and then you are the primary caregiver for someone with a, severe disability like that, the state will actually pay you to do that. So that, do they have a program like that for you guys?
It's actually what that's how I get paid right now.
Okay,
One of
awesome.
the ways that I do get paid to take care of my child, and I don't need a CNA license to do it.
Oh, oh, well, that's all. I mean, I'd
Yeah.
love there should be support for for people that are in those situations, right? I mean,
hmm
that's the beautiful thing about social services and living in a country like we do is that those safety nets are there. But
Yeah. For a while, my in-laws were here taking care of because I still had to work full time.
okay.
So they were getting the caregiver hours, which developed kind of a problem because we didn't have really the room for them in our home.
Oh,
And so they were actually living in one of our kids' rooms, and all three boys were living in the same room, which was not sustainable.
that sounds like chaos.
Yeah. So we began looking for an alternative. And what was the result of that was another act of God. So I remember posting a Facebook post talking about our situation with housing and trying to figure out what to do. And I referenced the verse that I spoke of earlier, where God provides even more than you can even ask or imagine. And somebody from my church read that post and read that verse. And the next day he called me and he said, I'd like to meet with you. So he actually came to my work and met with me during my lunch. And he said, my wife and I are prepared to help you. We'll find a place for Dan and Connie. And I didn't know what that meant. And he's like, well, do I have your permission to take the lead on this? I'm like, yes. And so they were looking around for a house, but the housing market at the time, even still here, it's just ridiculous. So what happened was a project to build an addition onto my home,
Oh,
and they started to build, and the church funded the addition. Most of the workers were from my church who came in on their nights and weekends after the regular job, not spending time with the family, and they built the addition onto my home so that my
that is
in-laws
so
could live in.
incredible.
It was amazing. Even somebody knew of somebody who knew of somebody who knew of somebody who owned a crane. And they
What?
used the crane to lift the truss over our house into the backyard.
Again, man, yeah, I mean, that's speaking to what you've said about God's providence, like just the way that even, and the way that things come together, but also the way that humans will rally together for things like
hmm
that. It's so beautiful. And I mean, everyone loves hearing about those things because there's something about that outside of just awe for it that is like an intangible, it's something about hearing those testaments of the human spirit, I think is just, I mean, it digs at people. So that was that in 2018-ish, 2019?
Yeah, so that happened I think 2018. Yeah, the remodel had ended right before the rainy season. It rains a lot in Oregon.
I was about to say, what do you mean season? You're in
Yeah,
Oregon.
it
Yeah.
rains a lot during the fall and winter, and they were able to wrap up. It was even like the progression with the building permits and getting everything passed, and it was so fast. Like the people that were doing it, they were just blown away at the timing of it all. And it ended the whole project. It was built before the season started, where we would get the rain. And it was a really good testimony, even to my neighbors, because they would see and we would talk about this. And then there were companies that would donate supplies to the addition. And I would talk to them like, do you know why you're here? And then you're like, no, don't you tell me. And so when I told them about what was going on, why they're actually here, they're like, whoa, like, yeah, that's so cool.
I love that, even though they're like, yeah, I don't know. We just know it's a cause and we're going to
Mm-hmm.
help. That's just,
Mm-hmm.
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So, I mean, eventually you were able to transition to where you've taken on the care
Mm-hmm.
and the book came along in that. When did you start? I guess I know you said it took 4 years to
It
write, so
took
that's
4 years.
been more recent than the timeline that we're at. But you mentioned that you've started working with other, I think you said Christian men specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really feel like, God's called me to help just kind of teach people how to be a good leader in their home. Because especially when I was an X-ray tech, I had heard over like time after time after time of spouses who had gone through health challenges to have like their husband or wife walk away during
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah.
And like that's the time where they need us the most.
Well, it doesn't even take that a lot of the time. It's a deployment
Mm,
or whatever. It's
hmm.
even smaller things. Yeah.
So yeah, I just began kind of sharing my story and sharing what God's teaching me. Yeah, I've one thing, the other thing that's been really crucial for me and is just being around a community of men. Yeah. A few years before the stroke, I had started going to this Bible study, and it was that group of guys that showed up for me the most during the hardest time of my life.
Yeah.
And their support was just, it was unreal what they did. They had organized like work parties to help with yard work or help me with projects in the home that I haven't done even years prior to the stroke. They just like, it was like, dude, we'll just get it done. And it was really neat to see. So,
Just, I mean, you've surrounded yourself with good people and
hmm.
they're coming through. And I mean, that, you know, it's almost like, yeah, you were there being the support for Michelle and your kids. And so I love that other people were there to provide that for you too, because that's a lot. And God, man, that's a lot to shoulder. But even now, right? Like you've got more stuff going on. That's, I think, a lot of, a thing that gets missed a lot with people, or maybe we lose sight of. I don't know why we do this as humans, but I think that, okay, X thing has happened, X thing is over, and now it's going to be sunshine and rainbows again. But like,
Hmm.
we're also thinking that like we're the only ones going through things.
Hmm.
Everyone is always battling with something.
You
And
know, that's why I wrote the book. I
mm,
wrote because like my original idea was take a movie for example. Like when you see a movie that you have the main character, they go through some stuff, and then like you can see the dark times, but then over the course of the movie and after the climax, things start getting better and better, and then by the time the movie is over, they're better than when they started. But there's a lot of people out there that don't have that. They're still in the tunnel. No, that's why the subtitle, walking through the light while in the tunnel. They don't see it. They don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. They don't. They're and to them, life is a marathon and not a sprint. They're
well,
constantly in. They're in it, and they just like us. Like we are still in it.
on that light, a lot of the times, hopefully it's not this way, but sometimes it is this way, that light at the end of the tunnel is still over the horizon. Like it is. And that's where we get this, that sense of hopelessness where it does feel inescapable because it's like, okay, I cannot get a break and there is not one coming. And I think that's powerful, like powerful wording, that choice of words. I'm sure you
Well,
guys thought about that a lot.
yeah, and the hope, the light that I'm talking about in the book is Jesus. Like no matter where you are at,
Mm.
there's hope that can be found in Him, and there's a verse in the Bible that talks about it says, hope deferred makes the heart grow sick, but desire fulfilled is a tree of life. That's in the Proverbs, and that's where I got the idea from the book. So what's the opposite of hope deferred? Hope undeferred. So then I kind of took that and I kind of just went with that. So
Yeah, that's
mhm.
neat, man. And it's, I think it's in sharing your guys' story. I think again, it's whether, and this comes up on here a lot. Just I've talked to, I'm drawn to people who have been through a lot, and not just been through a lot, but have come out on the other side and accomplished a lot, right? Like everyone's been through shit, but it's when you've gone on despite that to then accomplish big things for whatever reason that draws me into people. And like, but they need these, in your story, even if someone reads your book or even hears you talking, and by the way, I've wanted to ask you about this because you have this very just like mellow cadence to the way that you talk, and it's very calming and soothing, and it's I feel you need to narrate audiobooks if you haven't already done your own, but uh with whether if someone reads your book or even hears you talking, I think just as much value can come from these conversations directly, where it's another wife or a husband or a mother or a father who is caring for someone who has had a stroke and has been heavily affected and dealt with loss, but more so even in the parallels that people draw, where it's an abstraction of, okay, they can draw inspiration or hope or, some shred of a spark to move forward and carry and extrapolate that onto their own lives. And I, I appreciate what you're doing, and I'm so glad that we've been able to stop and talk through all of this and actually explore it. And you've just been, I think, so calm in it the whole time and positive, but not. It's very obvious that it's genuine positivity because you also hear people talking, and it seems like an act,
Yeah.
right? And that is obviously there's there's none of that with you, and it's refreshing that
Thanks, man. Appreciate the
it
kind
really
words.
is. Yeah. So, with the book, and how has the book been doing?
We've sold, I don't know, maybe 100, copies, but I think what we like most to do is to give copies out. Mm. So like we like to carry copies of the book in Michelle's wheelchair bag, and if we have conversations with people,
Oh,
we just like here, just take a copy. What Michelle really wants to do, I need to get more copies because I gave out the last one the other day, but she wants to get a whole bunch of books and deliver them to the fire station. The fire station that responded to us, they're located just down the street, and well, in a few turns away, kind of like what I was
yeah.
describing earlier. But we actually met the guy who intubated my wife. Michelle wanted to go to the fire station to meet him, and we were able to track him down. And we got a picture. Michelle got a picture with him, and I think he was a Marine. Something about Marines, right?
Yeah.
So, and it was really neat because we connected on the veteran level. But yeah, Michelle wants to. She just likes to give encouragement to people, and she always asks me like, oh, "Can we give them a copy of the book?" And now I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't have any more. I gotta order some. But yeah,
Yeah.
that we just like doing that. We like blessing people because like it really is. It was really therapeutic for me to write. I've always loved to write, and just I never thought that I would actually be an author. But
Dude, and it's so hard.
mhm,
I started writing a book last January, and I finished
mhm,
it in November, and then have been in revision, and then I'm in the process of trying to find either an editor or an agent to work with right now. And it is just
there's a lot.
unfathomable how much goes into it, dude. And it's,
Mm,
for you, like you mentioned, you were interviewing Michelle. That's got to be even harder because you're piecing together two stories. Like
mhm,
you should be very proud of that.
mm.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
And
it was a really neat interview. There were a lot of things in the book now that would not have been if she weren't able. It took her a long time to be able to get to the point where she was okay with doing that. This is
And
something that we
sharing
had
it.
talked about, right? Because
Yeah.
she does struggle with PTSD. You know, that is something that she's been diagnosed with. That because having gone through something so traumatic and so life altering, I mean, you can relate to that, you know. And so things are a lot different now than when they used to be. You know, she's not able to do the things that other moms do. Like she lost the ability to be able to pick up her 2-year-old,
Yeah,
when
that would
she had the
be.
stroke. So
How does she? I mean, yes, she's dealing with PTSD, but mentally day to day, I mean, how outlook wise, how's she doing?
she has her good days and she has her not so good days.
Okay.
What is really neat for me when I hear her talk to other people, I feel like she has a gift in with connecting with people. And the way that she talks to people when they're going through hard times, she can really speak to them. And it's really neat to see. And in a way, I think that one of the reasons why the support for us has been so, good was because of Michelle, the way that she treated people before the stroke. Like she was always the one to bring meals to people when they were in need. She was always the one to offer like babysitting for people. Even when we just moved to this area, we were
Just a
already
sweet
watching
person.
people's kids and we had just been here for a few weeks and we were already like babysitting. And she just always put herself out there and volunteered us to help when she felt the need, and not only did we get the addition built onto our house, but the church provided meals for us for 2 years, 2 days a week
Whoa.
for 2 whole years. And a lot of those times, the therapists and home health therapists were here helping Michelle, and they would see these people bring in loads of food. Again, it's just like an amazing testimony.
Yeah. Well, and so it's my understanding you have a YouTube channel now where you put out a
Do.
lot of this stuff, correct?
I do. Yeah.
What is that called? And I'll have links to all of this stuff in the
Yeah.
notes, but just so people can hear it.
It's called The Faithful Man's Journey.
Okay. And what kind of stuff is on? I mean, are you monologuing? Are you speaking with other Christian men?
Right
What's
now it's just me. Right now
okay?
it's just me trying to get it off the ground. So I started it not that long ago. And so I've done a couple long form videos, and the videos I take shorts and I post them there. A lot of it are like, our story, like lessons that I've learned and what God is teaching me, and just using our experience to help the kingdom, help spread the kingdom. That's what I'm about right now.
How are the kids doing with all of it? I mean, yeah, I know you said the youngest doesn't remember, but is everyone else?
The kids are
Have they?
thriving.
Okay.
So they're all athletes. So my oldest son is now going to districts for track, and he's I had a conversation with one of the track coaches yesterday, and she's like, just she kind of whispered to me. She said, like, Connor's actually our favorite.
He's what?
She said that Connor's actually our favorite
Oh,
because of his work ethic, the way that he pushes himself.
yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like he's inherited that and probably learned some of it too from parents, judging by everything else that I've heard over the last hour.
What's really neat is also he the way that he views suffering now is he says that suffering is actually good for you. He did a speech in front of his class about that. And he was talking about how suffering is actually, needed and used by God to help you, to bring you closer to him. At 17, he was talking about that.
Unfortunately, I do think that it's a necessary part of life
Hmm.
and the fact that, it teaches you a lot about yourself. It does build character and it does make you appreciate even outside of, your, like you've mentioned, drawing you closer to God and drawing people closer to God. Just that friction that comes out of that does build a stronger human being, assuming that you have the skills, the coping skills to deal with it and to come out on the other side of whatever that suffering is. But, and yeah, just, I mean, the appreciation that comes out of it, even something as small as when you're really, really sick. And then, if you get the flu and you're puking your guts out for a week, and then when you, on the other side, like you're just happy that you're not puking. It's like, it is, it's a vital part of the human experience on, not that anyone wants to go through it and you don't want to see anyone go through it, but I don't think it's anything that's going to go away anytime soon. I'm not sure that the world would be net wise in a better place if we didn't have it. As odd as that sounds, I think if you really stop and think
Right.
about it, we do need it. And
Yeah.
so
It's not really good while you're going through it. It doesn't feel good while you're
no,
going through it. But afterward, if you, it's all about like your perspective and how you view it. You know, a lot of people can call stuff like that can really drive people away from their faith.
well,
You
and
know,
it can become like poisonous almost.
mhm.
Yeah.
It's like we
And
all have a fork in the road, and we have to decide how we're gonna view it. Is it gonna be something that is gonna shape us in a negative way and allow like bitterness and anger to creep in, or are we gonna use it for good?
yeah, and you have a choice in how you handle those things and how you no, you don't choose what life is going to throw at you, but you do have the choice of how to look at it, especially after the fact. Like sometimes, yes, it's, you've earned the right while you're in the middle of it to give yourself a little bit of a pity party, but you will not come out of it if you don't, out of the suffering, if you don't pull yourself out of that pity party. And on the other side, to look back and again, it's the very way that this conversation started is choosing to focus on the positives that have come out of it and highlight those things and reinforce those things instead of dwelling on the
Yeah.
negatives. So, I mean, this has been, I've really, really enjoyed your candor and all of this. And just, again, I'm telling you, man, there's something the way, the cadence of your speaking and your voice is so calming. Like I felt like I was kind of, my own tone was changing a little bit when I was talking, but can you tell everyone again, unless I've missed something here for you to tell everyone about, can you tell everyone again where they can find you and find the book? And I will have links to all of this, but I want everyone to hear it again.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, so I do a lot of posts on Instagram. My name is, so I have two different Instagram accounts. One I should just delete it because it makes it confusing. So one I'm really focusing on, and it kind of ties in with the Faithful Man's Journey. So it's kind of like that is my brand. That is what I'm building, and who knows where it will go. One thing that I would love to be able to do is I would love to share a story in like a kind of wider way, even speaking or and my wife and I are going to be soon getting involved in our church and talking with like the 18 to 24 age group, because I feel like that is a pretty significant group of people that they're just starting their lives. They're going to be getting married, starting a career. They may not be thinking about this, and I just feel like we can offer a lot of value to
It's
to people. So yeah, people can find me on Instagram. I just type in my name. They go to YouTube, faithfulmensjourney.com, and the book can be found at hopeunderfur.com. But I have links over. And I actually have so if they go to um my Instagram account, there's a link where they can download what I call the Faithful Man's Playbook. And the Faithful Man's Playbook are the key verses in there that can really help them to get thinking more about what it means to be a godly husband, about being a godly father. And then I have a email sequence that I started where they kind of share a bit about my story, and it culminates in a challenge. So have you heard of the five love languages?
Yes, I
Okay.
listened to or read that book while I was going through divorce, and it taught me a lot. It really just I think about everything that went wrong in the relationship on both sides. It's a great
Yeah.
book if people should look into that for sure.
And so what I have in the challenge, I'm kind of going over those like love languages, and helping them figure out, okay, which one is the one that fits their spouse. And then the culmination of that is ultimately I have a Zoom Bible study Friday mornings, 8 a.m. Pacific, where we meet on Zoom, and we have it's like accountability group. People talk about their wins. They talk about like how long they've celebrated sobriety, whether that sobriety is from alcohol, from drugs, from looking at porn, from all of these things. And then we go into the Bible. We're reading the Bible through in a year. So it's really neat. It's a really neat group that, if people don't have that in their life, they need it. So one thing that really helped me is that community that I had developed before the stroke. So people don't wait until something happens before you plug in. You have to have something already built so that when those things happen, that that people know you, and they're able to help. So a lot of people, they tend to feel that I don't want to burden anybody, to ask. A lot of people don't want to let them in. They don't want to ask for help.
Yeah, that's a
That,
tough one.
that was me for a long time too. But then somebody told me, they said, when I don't ask for help, it's like I'm robbing their crowns from them. So there's a verse in the Bible that says God has prepared good works to do so that you may walk in them. So everything good that we do is already prepared for us to do. So when we don't ask for help, we're not allowing those people to do the things that they were called to do.
Mm. I
Mm.
think even in a less abstract sense as well. And this is something I've had to learn since losing my sight, and I'm still not good at. I will
Mhm.
sit here and run my head through a wall before I ask for help on something. I will
Mhm.
exhaust every possible means of trying to do it myself before I need help from someone. But people want to help too. Like
Mhm.
that's you're not. You're not being some burden. If it's help and you need it, and you're a good person, like people want to help you.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
it's hard to swallow your pride in that, but
Right.
knowing that might help you do that. And,
I was
and
actually called out just recently because somebody was saying that how they could help. And while I knew it was some things I didn't want to say, he's like, well, maybe that's just pride. So even still,
yeah.
I have things that I'm working on that I need to let go of.
Yeah. And you also need that, like that. Some of that is also you being resourceful and being,
Right.
like knowing that you're strong enough to handle that stuff. Does that mean
Mhm.
that, that you should always have to do that?
Right.
No. And that's
Yeah. It's
finding that balance.
you don't want to be too needy. Exactly. Because
Yeah.
then people just look at you like, dude, like, come on,
Yeah.
you gotta stand on your own 2 feet. Let's go.
Yeah, now you're being soft. Like
Right.
there's a fine line, but
Yeah.
awesome, man. I hope this drives I hope this drives people to what you're doing. I've enjoyed all of this. And honestly, I was thinking about this morning. I was like, I didn't even think about it until I was getting on and doing my sound check and stuff before I got the recording set up. Was, having Michelle in on this would have been really, really cool too. But if you've got stuff in the future, feel free to reach out. I'd love to stay connected. You know how to get in
Yeah.
contact with me. So
I'll have to bring it up and ask. So Michelle, I think she's wanting to get more involved, and she's wanting to share her side of the story too, because it is, I mean, she's walking, the physical things are happening to her. If it weren't for the things that happened to her, we wouldn't be talking either. So
Yeah. Maybe when book 2 comes out, then you
I
reach out.
actually, it's interesting. Like I don't have it on Audible yet. I don't have our book on Audible. So now that I got my my new microphone, I'm thinking about doing the Audible so I can get it out. Because I know a lot of people like to listen to books as opposed to read. So I might just have to do it. Just
Yeah, and it'll be worth it once you do it. I think
yeah.
again, I would imagine revisiting it now and
Hmm.
reading through it would probably give even more of that healing in a different way. It's
Yeah.
you take some time away from that and process that stuff again as you're reading it
Hmm.
like, holy shit, we went through that. And
I know.
just, yeah. So thank you for taking the time and just, I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you for getting out there and trying to help others, and tell Michelle that I said thank you for trying to get out there and get and help others through these things, and just being, a strong kind of guide, both of you, that people can follow.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Zach. I really appreciate the time and thank you for having me on the show.
And thanks everyone at home for listening to another episode of Going In Blind. If you haven't already, rate and review the show wherever you listened, and then share this around with someone who needs to hear it.